Hello, and welcome to this Childcare Provider Expansion Initiative presentation on spending strategies. Even before you open your childcare business, you will have many expenses that you'll need to pay for. You'll need to consider the cost for licensing, materials, supplies, staffing, including staff training, marketing and equipment, and much more. This list doesn't even include what you might need to pay to secure your location and make sure it's up to code and ready to serve young children. The Childcare Provider Expansion Initiative is designed to help offset some of these expenses for programs that are just opening or that are expanding to serve more children. Planning ahead and deciding where to spend your award funding and money from other sources can seem overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. This presentation will help you navigate common costs associated with launching a new childcare program. You will also learn what expenses you can use the Childcare Provider Expansion Awards on and which ones you can't. The information contained here has been prepared by Civitas Strategies Early Start and is not intended to constitute legal, tax, or financial advice. The Civitas Strategies Early Start team has used reasonable efforts in collecting, preparing, and providing this information, but does not guarantee its accuracy, completeness, adequacy, or currency. The publication and distribution of this information is not intended to create, and receipt does not constitute, an attorney-client or any other advisor relationship. Reproduction of this information is expressly prohibited. As we move through this presentation, you will learn how to plan for spending your funds, the limits on how funding can be spent, and how to develop a plan for any additional funding that may be needed. Once you have determined you are going to open a new childcare business, your first thought is likely about where you will find the money to open it. It's best to have a realistic idea of your startup costs and compare it to your anticipated funding for the business and understand if there are any gaps. Following these 5 basic steps will ensure that you are strategically using your funds in a way that results in a successful startup. The following slides will go over each step in more detail. Step 1. Make a list of all your costs. Your startup budget should include a list of everything that you need to launch your new childcare business. Those costs will usually fall into these categories you see here. Personnel includes your staff wages, benefits, and payroll taxes, and could also include training expenses. Supplies, that includes your classroom, office, and general building supplies. Equipment, including classroom and office furniture, outdoor equipment and technology. Minor remodeling. Operating costs, which includes your rent or mortgage, utilities, communications, and insurance. Marketing and advertising. Permitting fees, and other or miscellaneous categories. Think through your expansion or startup project and put together a list of all your anticipated expenses and cost estimates within these categories. Include as much detail as possible, including how much you expect each part to cost you. Step 2. Make a list of all your funding sources. Most business startups will involve you spending money before you begin to bring in much revenue. Since you may not have any revenue to invest in your business, you will need to identify the sources that this initial funding will come from. The list of your funding sources will include sources that are already committed, pending, or anticipated, and how much each will contribute. For example, if you need financing for your startup, you will want to understand if those funds are already in process of being paid to you and/or what the likelihood of receiving them will be. Take a moment to list all your available funding sources and whether there are any restrictions on how you can use those funds. Step 3. Identify costs that are eligible for coverage. Now that you have identified your costs and funding sources, it's important to be strategic in how your funding will be allocated. Often, loans and awards, such as the Expansion Initiative, come with guidelines on how they can be used. It's important to be aware of those guidelines so you can plan accordingly. Here are some ways you can use your funds to support your business in the early months. Please note that there are limitations on how these funds can be spent, and you will want to make sure you are complying with the allowable expenses. You can learn more about how the funding can be spent by revisiting the application guide. Step 4. Match your costs and funding sources. Now that you've identified all your expenses and funding sources and noted which costs can and cannot be covered by your Child Care Provider Expansion Initiative funding, you can match your available funding to your anticipated costs. Set up a simple list or table like the one you see here. As you begin to assign a funding source to each anticipated cost, make sure that you prioritize figuring out how to pay for any of your costs that have restrictions on how they can be paid for. We'll talk more about this in the next slide. Be sure to refer to the expansion application guide if you have questions about how you want to use the funds. Remember, if you have an expense that is not allowed under the funding award agreement, you can still purchase the item and use the funds from the award towards something allowable already in your business budget. Funds cannot be used for new construction or major renovations. The federal source of the funding for this initiative prohibits using the award for construction or major renovations or the purchase or improvement of land. Major renovation is defined as 1. Structural changes to the foundation, roof, floor, exterior or load-bearing walls of a facility, or the extension of a facility to increase its floor area, or 2. Extensive alteration of a facility, such as to significantly change its function and purpose, even if such renovation does not include any structural change. Funds cannot be used for costs to support property occupancy other than monthly payments, so down payments, security deposits, and any other one-time payment associated with entering a lease or purchasing property are not allowable. Nor can funds be used to contribute to mortgage loans in excess of the payment requested by the lender. Paying yourself through owner draws is also not allowed. Owner draws or other methods of taking a capital gain are not considered allowable expenses under the Child Care Provider Expansion Initiative. However, owners' documented wages are allowable. Franchise fees or other franchise royalties are not allowable, and expenses paid for by another stimulus, relief funding program, or other public funding source, such as the Child Care Relief Fund, are not allowable. Now, it is likely that you will have some building renovation needs. Just because you cannot use your expansion initiative award for these projects does not mean you cannot or should not make the renovations anyway. If you find that you do need to pay for major building renovations or other costs that aren't allowed by your award, we suggest that you pay for it out of your regular operating budget and then use your award fund for something on the approved list of allowable expenses. For example, if you've built up your own savings to cover payroll costs before you have children enrolled, but you don't have any other funds available to cover construction costs, you might want to consider how you're using your funding. So instead of using your own savings on something that you can use expansion award funding for, you can then use your savings to cover the construction costs and now free up the initial award funding to be used towards those payroll costs. This way you have money to cover both expenses. Always remember to look back at your anticipated costs to see if the Child Care Provider Expansion Initiative funding can be used towards the expense in question. Step 5. Develop a plan for additional funding needs. Once you've completed allocating your available funding toward your anticipated costs, you may find yourself in a situation where you still need additional funds. There are a few steps you can take to plan to effectively fund your expansion project. Step 1. Revisit your pricing. Ensure your pricing or tuition is accurate and up to date. Oftentimes, childcare businesses underprice their services in efforts to increase access to care or aim towards fuller enrollment. However, as a business, it is important to ensure your pricing accurately reflects the needs of your business and sets you up for financial success. Step 2, trim your costs. Are all your expenses necessary? Look at your budget and see if there's any trimming or postponing that can be done. Look at recurring costs like subscription or items that you can put on a list of future goals. And don't forget to look at automation options that can help you better manage your time. Step 3, explore loan options. Taking out a loan is a big responsibility. However, sometimes the benefits outweigh the risk of taking on additional debt. You can learn how to understand when a loan is a wise choice for your business in our online guide available at TWC's website. Always remember, if you need additional help, there are many helpful resource guides available at childcare.texas.gov. Today, we discussed spending strategies, including how to plan your spending, the initiative's funding limits, and what to do if you need additional funding. All these topics and more have in-depth informational guides available at childcare.texas.gov. And if you'd like a coach to think through some of these ideas with you, or any other challenges you are facing in your business, you can sign up for one-on-one coaching with our experts at childcare.texas.gov. Help is available on business, finance, staffing, and so much more.